The crystal paperweight exploded against the mahogany desk as Victoria Sterling stared at the most insane legal document she'd ever seen. Her husband of 20 years had just handed her divorce papers with a twist that would make your jaw drop. "You want me to what?" she whispered. Marcus didn't even look up from his phone. "Sign the divorce papers. Then you'll marry Brooke. It's the only way to keep the business assets clean." Yes, you heard that right. Her cheating husband was demanding she divorce him and then marry his pregnant mistress. But here's what Marcus and his manipulative mother Eleanor didn't know. Victoria Sterling wasn't the pushover wife they thought she was. She was about to uncover a web of corporate espionage, immigration fraud, and family betrayal that would destroy everything they'd built. This is the story of a woman who lost everything and discovered that sometimes losing everything is the only way to find out who you really are. You're about to witness the most shocking family takedown you've ever heard. A story so unbelievable, it'll make you question everything you think you know about marriage, power, and revenge. Trust me, you do not want to miss what happens when Victoria finally fights back. The crystal paperweight exploded against the mahogany desk. Shards scattered across the divorce papers like deadly confetti. Victoria Sterling stood frozen in the executive office that had once been hers. 42 years old, 20 years of marriage, 15 years building Sterling Industries from nothing. And now this. "You want me to what?" Her voice barely a whisper. Marcus didn't look up from his phone. His fingers tapped against the screen with the same rhythm he used when closing million-dollar deals. "You heard me, Victoria. Sign the divorce papers. Then you'll marry Brooke. It's the only way to keep the business assets clean." The words made no sense. None of this made sense. Victoria's hands trembled as she gripped the back of the leather chair. The same chair where she'd nursed James during late-night strategy sessions, where she'd celebrated their first million-dollar contract with champagne and tears of joy. "Marcus, look at me." Her voice stronger now. "Look at me and explain how you expect your wife to marry your mistress." He finally raised his eyes. Cold, calculating, like she was a quarterly report that needed reviewing, not the woman who'd built his empire beside him. "Ex-wife, and it's temporary, a business arrangement. Brooke needs citizenship status sorted quickly, and this keeps everything in the family trust." Eleanor Sterling spoke from the corner. Her voice carried the authority of someone who'd been making family decisions for 60 years. "Really, Victoria? Must you be so dramatic? It's just paperwork." Victoria's mother-in-law sat perfectly composed in the wingback chair. Her silver hair gleamed under the office lights like polished steel. The woman who'd welcomed Victoria into the family 20 years ago now watched her destruction with the interest of someone observing a chess match. "Just paperwork," Victoria repeated the word slowly. Each syllable felt foreign on her tongue. "A marriage is just paperwork to you? When it serves the greater good of this family, yes." Eleanor's voice carried that crisp authority that had intimidated Victoria for decades. "Brooke is pregnant, dear. The child needs legitimacy. You and Marcus are finished anyway. This way, everyone benefits." The room tilted. Pregnant. Victoria grabbed the desk edge. The wood felt solid under her palms, the only real thing in a world that had suddenly turned upside down. "How long?" 5 months. Brooke spoke for the first time, her voice small but determined. "I'm sorry, Victoria. I never meant for any of this to happen." 5 months. Victoria's mind raced backward through the calendar. The business trip to Chicago. Marcus had been distant afterward, distracted. She'd blamed stress from the Henderson merger, the merger she'd written, the merger that had saved their company. "The Henderson merger," Victoria's voice came out flat. "You were sleeping with her during the Henderson merger." Marcus shrugged. The gesture was casual, dismissive, like discussing the weather. "Business is business, Victoria. Personal is personal. Don't confuse the two." 20 years. 20 years she'd confused the two. Built a life where business and personal intertwined so completely she couldn't tell where the company ended and her marriage began. Now she understood. For Marcus, they'd always been separate. She'd been the business partner. Brooke was personal. "And if I refuse?" Eleanor smiled, not warm, predatory, like a cat that had cornered a mouse. Then you get nothing. No severance, no stake in the company you helped build. No custody arrangement that protects the children from this mess. Nothing. Victoria looked around the office. Her diplomas on the wall, the photos of company milestones, the Crystal Award from the Chamber of Commerce. Best business partnership. She thought it meant the company. Now she realized it had meant her marriage. A marriage that was about to become even stranger. I need time to think. You have until tomorrow morning. Marcus was already back to his phone. His fingers moved across the screen with practiced efficiency. Brooke has an appointment with immigration on Friday. We need this handled. Victoria walked to the window. 30 floors below, Seattle's downtown bustled with normal people living normal lives. People whose husbands didn't demand they marry the mistress. People whose 20-year marriages didn't end with the ultimatums and business arrangements. She turned back to the room, Marcus typing emails. Eleanor checking her manicure with the concentration of a surgeon. Brooke staring at her hands, the massive engagement ring catching the light. A ring bigger than Victoria's had ever been. One question, Victoria's voice cut through the casual cruelty. Why? Why this elaborate arrangement? Why not just divorce me and marry her normally? Marcus finally looked up. His expression suggested mild annoyance, like she'd interrupted an important call. Tax implications, trust structures. It's complicated, Victoria. You wouldn't understand the financial intricacies. The financial intricacies of the company she'd helped structure, the trusts she'd helped establish, the tax strategies she'd researched and implemented during countless late nights while he attended charity galas. Victoria felt something shift inside her chest, not breaking, hardening. I'll give you my answer tomorrow morning. She walked to the door, then paused. Her hand rested on this brass handle that she'd turned thousands of times. Oh, and Marcus, I understand the financial intricacies perfectly. After all, I wrote most of them. The door closed behind her with a soft click. In the hallway, she pressed her back against the cool wood and closed her eyes. The marble floors stretched endlessly in both directions. 20 years of walking these halls. 20 years of building something she'd thought was permanent. Tomorrow morning, she'd give them an answer, but first, she had calls to make. Victoria's phone buzzed in her purse. 3 missed calls from Grace. 2 text messages from James asking when she'd be home for dinner. 1 voicemail from her mother in Portland. She checked her phone 3 times as the elevator descended. Lock, unlock, lock, unlock, lock. The habit she'd developed during stressful negotiations. The numbers on the screen blurred together. She couldn't focus long enough to read the messages. The lobby stretched before her like a cathedral. Marble columns, crystal chandeliers, the Sterling Industries logo etched in gold on the wall. All of it felt foreign now, like visiting a museum of her former life. Outside, Seattle's November air bit through her wool coat. The sky hung low and gray, threatening rain. Victoria stood on the sidewalk and realized she had nowhere to go. The house didn't feel like home anymore. The office wasn't hers. Even her car felt contaminated by the conversation she'd just escaped. Her phone rang. Grace, Vic, where are you? I've been calling for an hour. Victoria's voice came out steady, surprisingly steady. I'm downtown. Grace, I need to tell you something. But not over the phone. Are you okay? You sound strange. Victoria looked up at the Sterling Industries building. 30 floors of glass and steel reaching toward the cloudy sky. Her name was still on the directory. Her parking space was still reserved. Her office still contained 20 years of her professional life. I don't know if I'm okay, but I will be. Victoria's hands shook as she turned the key in her front door. Their front door, for now. The house felt different, like a museum of someone else's life. 20 years of memories displayed in perfect order, but none of them felt real anymore. The family photos on the mantel showed strangers wearing her face. The wedding portrait above the fireplace seemed to mock her with its frozen happiness. Her phone buzzed again. Grace. Vic, I saw Marcus's car leave the office without you. What happened in their air? Victoria sank onto the white leather sofa, the Italian leather she'd chosen 5 years ago. The sofa Brooke had probably been sitting on during all those late-night meetings with Marcus. Grace, I need you to come over and bring wine. A lot of wine. On my way. Victoria hung up and stared at the divorce papers spread across the coffee table. Standard dissolution documents printed on cream-colored paper. Except for the addendum Eleanor's lawyer had prepared. The one requiring Victoria to enter into a legal marriage with Brooke Hamilton within 30 days of the divorce finalization. A legal marriage to her husband's pregnant mistress. She laughed. The sound echoed strangely in the quiet house, bouncing off the cathedral ceilings in custom millwork. Then she laughed harder. The laughter turned hollow, then desperate. Then she was crying. The doorbell rang 20 minutes later. Grace Patterson stood on the porch holding 3 bottles of wine and wearing a look of murderous concern. Her red hair was pulled back severely, which meant she was in crisis management mode. Okay, talk. What did that bastard do now? Victoria held up the papers. Her hand trembled slightly. He wants me to marry his mistress. Grace blinked, set down the wine carefully on the entry table, took the papers with the precision of someone defusing a bomb, read them twice, looked at Victoria. I'm sorry, what? Apparently Brooke needs citizenship help, and this keeps everything in the family trust structure. Victoria's voice sounded detached, like she was discussing someone else's insane life. Oh, and she's pregnant. 5 months. Grace was already opening wine. The cork came free with a satisfying pop. 5 months. So this was going on during the Henderson merger. Yes. Victoria accepted the overfilled glass gratefully. The wine was cheap. Real wine, not the expensive bottles Marcus chose to impress clients. Remember how proud I was that we landed that contract? How I thought Marcus was finally seeing me as an equal partner. Jesus, Vic. It gets better. Victoria took a long drink. The wine was acidic, harsh, perfect for the moment. If I don't agree, I get nothing. No severance, no company stake, no custody arrangement. 20 years of my life, and they've figured out how to erase it completely. Grace was reading the papers again, her face growing darker with each page. Vic, this is insane. This can't be legal. Eleanor's lawyer seems to think it is, something about contractual obligations and trust beneficiary requirements. Victoria took another drink. I helped design those trust structures, Grace. I wrote the bylaws that are now being used to trap me. They sat in silence. Outside, the Seattle rain had started. Soft at first, then harder. The sound Victoria usually found comforting now felt ominous, like the sky was crying for the life she was about to lose. What are you going to do? Victoria stared into her wine. The liquid was dark red, almost black in the dim light. I keep thinking about James and Becca. If I fight this, if I refuse, what happens to them? Eleanor made it clear the custody arrangement protects them from this mess. What if fighting means losing them too? And if you agree, if you actually go through with this crazy plan, then I marry my husband's pregnant mistress and smile for the cameras while they destroy everything I built. Victoria's voice cracked. God, Grace, how did I become this person? This weak, trapped person? Grace moved closer on the sofa. Her presence was warm, solid, real. You're not weak, Vic. You're in an impossible situation created by people who've been planning this for months, maybe years. Years? Victoria looked up sharply. Think about it. The timing is too perfect. The legal structure's too complex. This isn't a spur-of-the-moment solution to an affair. This is a long-term strategy. Victoria's mind began turning. The late nights Marcus had blamed on work. The mysterious legal consultations Eleanor had been having. The way Brooke had been introduced to the company's social events 6 months ago as a potential consultant. They've been planning this. The words came out slow but certain. They've been planning to push me out and bring her in. And the pregnancy gives them the perfect excuse. Grace's voice was grim. The family dynasty continues, but with a younger, more controllable wife. Victoria stood up abruptly. Her legs felt unsteady, whether from wine or shock, she couldn't tell. She paced to the window looking out at the Seattle skyline. In the reflection, she saw a woman who'd spent 20 years making herself smaller, quieter, more accommodating. A woman who'd let Eleanor's criticism chip away at her confidence. A woman who'd celebrated her husband's successes while minimizing her own contributions. I wrote the Henderson contract, Grace. I know. I structured the Morrison deal. I handled the Peterson crisis when Marcus was in Europe with... Victoria paused. The pieces were clicking together with horrible clarity. With Brooke, apparently. I know, Vic. I built half this company, more than half. Victoria turned from the window. And they think they can just erase me? Replace me with a 28-year-old who needs a green card. Grace smiled for the first time all evening. There's the Victoria Sterling I remember. Victoria felt something she hadn't felt in months. Anger. Clean, energizing anger. Not the confused hurt of betrayal, but the focused fury of someone who'd finally seen the game being played. Grace, I need you to do something for me. Anything. I need you to research everything you can about trust law, immigration marriage requirements, and business partnership dissolutions. Victoria's voice was steadying, strengthening with each word. If they want to play legal games, I need to understand all the rules. Done. What else? Victoria looked at the divorce papers again, but this time, instead of seeing her destruction, she saw something else. Opportunity. I need to call David Morrison, the lawyer who handled the Peterson case, the lawyer who's about to handle the most interesting divorce case of his career. Victoria picked up her phone. If Marcus wants to play chess, he's about to learn that I've been watching his moves for 20 years. As she dialed, rain continued to beat against the windows. Each drop hit the gossip like a tiny fist demanding attention. But for the first time since walking into that office, Victoria Sterling felt like herself again. The woman who'd built a company from nothing. The woman who'd turned a small consulting firm into a multi-million-dollar operation. The woman who'd been hiding behind 20 years of accommodation and compromise. That woman was done hiding. Her phone connected. David Morrison's voice was warm, professional. Victoria, this is unexpected. How can I help you? Victoria looked at Grace, then at the papers, then at her reflection in the dark window. David, I need the best divorce attorney in Seattle, and I need them tonight. You're looking at him. What's going on? Something that's going to make your career very interesting. David Morrison's law office smelled like leather and coffee. Real coffee, not the stuff from the machine in Sterling Industries break room. Victoria wrapped her hands around the warm mug and tried to process everything David had just explained. Rain drummed against the windows. The sound filled the silence between his words like a metronome counting down to disaster. So, legally, there's nothing preventing this arrangement. David's voice was careful, professional. Marriage is a contract. If all parties consent, even unusual arrangements are valid. Victoria set down her coffee. The mug clinked against the glass table. But it's insane. Insane isn't illegal. David leaned back in his chair. The leather creaked under his weight. What concerns me more are the financial implications. Victoria, if you sign these papers as written, you're giving up rights to assets you helped accumulate during a 20-year marriage. But they've structured it so I get nothing if I refuse. They've structured it to make you think that. David pulled out a different set of papers. The pages rustled as he spread them across his desk. I've been reviewing Washington state community property laws. They can't simply erase your contributions to the marital estate. Victoria felt a spark of hope, the first real hope she'd felt since Marcus had dropped his bombshell. What do you mean? Your name is on half the business documents. Your signature is on the bank accounts. Your social security number is tied to the tax filings. David spread the papers across his desk like a poker player, revealing a winning hand. Eleanor Sterling is a brilliant strategist, but she's overplayed her hand. For the first time in 24 hours, Victoria smiled. Explain. The trust structures you helped create, they require both spouses' signatures for major changes. The company bylaws you wrote, they specify that founding partners maintain voting rights even after personal relationship changes. David's eyes gleamed with the light of a lawyer who'd found the perfect loophole. They need your cooperation to make this work cleanly. Without it, everything gets messy. So if you refuse and file for divorce independently, you force them into a lengthy legal battle where every business decision, every financial transfer, every trust modification gets scrutinized. David leaned forward. Victoria, you hold more cards than they want you to realize. Victoria's phone buzzed on the table. The sound was sharp, insistent. Text from Marcus. Need your answer by 5 p.m. today. Brooke's appointment moved up. She showed David the message. He frowned, reading it twice. They're pressuring you. That's interesting. Interesting how? If they had as much control as they're pretending, they wouldn't need to rush. David made a note on his legal pad. His handwriting was precise, controlled. Something else is going on here. Victoria's mind raced. Grace is researching the legal requirements for immigration marriages. What if there's a deadline they haven't told me about? Or what if there's a business deadline? David pulled up something on his computer. The screen glowed blue in the dim office light. Victoria, what major contracts is Sterling Industries currently negotiating? The Yamamoto deal. It's worth $50 million, but they've been very particular about company stability and family ownership structures. Victoria's eyes widened as the pieces fell into place. Oh my God. If Sterling Industries can't demonstrate stable family leadership, they lose the contract. Victoria stood up, pacing to the window. Outside, Seattle's financial district spread below them like a circuit board. Marcus isn't just trying to get rid of me. He's trying to replace me with someone the Yamamoto family will see as a stable, traditional wife and mother. David was already typing. His fingers moved quickly across the keyboard. When is the Yamamoto decision expected? Next month, but there's a preliminary review next week. Victoria felt pieces clicking into place with horrible clarity. David, Brooke isn't just young and pregnant. She has an MBA from Wharton. She speaks fluent Japanese. So this isn't about love or even just getting rid of you. This is about the Yamamoto contract. Victoria sank back into her chair. The leather was cold against her back. $50 million. That's why they need this done quickly. That's why they can't wait for a normal divorce and remarriage timeline. Her phone rang. Grace's name appeared on the screen. Vic, I found something. Can you meet me at that coffee shop on Pine Street? I'm at David's office. Can you come here? No, not on the phone, not at a law office, too public. Pine Street, 20 minutes. The line went dead. Victoria looked at David. Grace found something that can't be discussed on the phone or in a law office. David closed his laptop. The screen went dark. Then we better go hear what she found. 20 minutes later, they sat in a corner booth at Murphy's Coffee. The shop was nearly empty. Rain streaked the windows, turning the outside world into watercolor smears. Grace slid a manila folder across the table like she was passing state secrets. I did some digging into Brooke Hamilton's background. Grace's voice was quiet, urgent. Vic, she's not who they're pretending she is. Victoria opened the folder. Inside were printouts of social media posts, university records, and employment history. The papers felt crisp, important. I don't understand. Brooke Hamilton graduated from Wharton 3 years ago, but look at her employment history. Grace pointed to a highlighted section. She worked for Yamamoto Industries' New York office for 18 months before coming to Seattle. David whistled low. She's not just Marcus's mistress. She's a Yamamoto plant. It gets worse. Grace flipped to another page. Her student visa expired 6 months ago. She's been working illegally since then. But here's the interesting part. Yamamoto Industries has been sponsoring her visa applications until last month when they suddenly withdrew support. Victoria stared at the documents. The words swam before her eyes as she tried to process the implications. So she lost her job and her visa status. She needed a new solution fast. And Marcus provided one. Grace's expression was grim. But Vic, look at the timeline. She started at Yamamoto Industries right after Sterling Industries first reached out about the partnership. 2 years ago, Victoria's voice was barely a whisper. This has been planned for 2 years. David was studying the papers, his lawyer's mind working through the implications. Victoria, this changes everything. If we can prove that Marcus entered into a relationship with a Yamamoto employee specifically to influence the contract negotiations, that's corporate espionage. Victoria felt her world reshaping again. That's criminal. Grace nodded. And if the marriage arrangement is part of covering up the corporate espionage, Then refusing to participate isn't just about the divorce. David's voice was excited now, energized by the legal possibilities. It's about preventing you from becoming an accessory to a federal crime. Victoria's phone buzzed again. Marcus. 3 hours, Victoria. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. She looked at her phone, then at the documents, then at her best friend and her lawyer. 2 years of planning, 2 years of manipulation. 2 years of making her feel like she was losing her mind while they systematically destroyed her life. But now she had something they didn't expect. She had the truth. David, what happens if I show up at 5 o'clock with a counter-proposal? What kind of counter-proposal? Victoria smiled. For the first time in 2 years, she felt like she was thinking clearly. The fog of confusion and self-doubt was lifting, replaced by the sharp focus that had built her career. The kind that reminds Marcus Sterling exactly who he's been underestimating. She sat in her car outside Murphy's Coffee for 5 minutes, engine running, unable to make herself drive home and face what was waiting there. The windows fogged with her breath. The radio played soft jazz that seemed completely disconnected from the chaos of her life. This was it, the moment where she chose between the comfortable lie and the dangerous truth, between the woman she'd been for 20 years and the woman she was about to become. Victoria Sterling put the car in drive and headed home to prepare for war. At 4:45 p.m., Victoria Sterling walked into the Sterling Industries conference room carrying a leather portfolio and wearing the Navy suit she'd bought for their first major contract presentation 20 years ago. It still fit perfectly. Some things she realized never changed. The conference room smelled like expensive cologne and fear. Rain continued to beat against the floor-to-ceiling windows, each drop exploding like tiny grenades against the glass. Marcus looked up from his phone, annoyed. His tie was loosened, a sure sign of stress. Victoria, we said 5 o'clock. I know what we said. Victoria placed her portfolio on the table and remained standing. I also know what you didn't say. Eleanor Sterling sat at the head of the table, exactly where she'd positioned herself for every major family decision for 2 decades. Her spine was straight, her hands folded. A queen presiding over the dissolution of a kingdom. Brooke sat beside Marcus, her hands folded over her barely visible pregnancy bump. She looked young, scared. Nothing like the confident corporate spy Victoria now knew her to be. Well, Marcus's impatience was showing, his fingers drummed against the table in rapid staccato. Are you going to sign or do we need to discuss your other options? Oh, we're definitely going to discuss options. Victoria opened her portfolio and pulled out a thick document. The pages rustled in the quiet room. But first, I have some questions about Brooke's employment history. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Victoria could see it in the way Eleanor's shoulders tensed, the way Marcus's drumming stopped, the way Brooke's face went pale. Brooke's voice was barely audible. I don't understand. Yamamoto Industries, New York office, 18 months. Victoria's voice was conversational, but her eyes were steel. Specifically the corporate partnerships division, specifically monitoring potential acquisition targets and strategic partnerships. Marcus started to speak, but Victoria held up her hand. The gesture was sharp, commanding. For once he listened. My question is this. When exactly did Yamamoto Industries assign you to monitor Sterling Industries as a potential partner? And when did that assignment evolve into seducing the co-founder's husband? Silence. Eleanor's perfectly composed expression cracked slightly, like ice beginning to splinter. The rain seemed louder now, more insistent. Victoria, Marcus's voice carried a warning. You're fishing, you're upset, and you're making wild accusations. Am I? Victoria pulled out Grace's research folder. The documents felt heavy in her hands, weighted with truth. Because according to public records, Brooke's employment with Yamamoto ended abruptly last month. Same week you started pressuring me about divorce arrangements. Same week Brooke's visa status became precarious. She spread the documents across the conference table like playing cards in a high-stakes game. So my real question is this. Is the baby actually yours, Marcus? Or is paternity just another part of the business arrangement? Brooke gasped. The sound was sharp, wounded. Marcus shot to his feet, his chair rolling backward into the wall. Eleanor remained perfectly still, But Victoria could see the calculation in her eyes. How dare you, Tag? Marcus's voice was dangerous. How dare you question the paternity of my child? Your child? Victoria tilted her head. Or Yamamoto Industries insurance policy? That's enough. Eleanor finally spoke. Her voice cut through the tension like a blade. Victoria, you're clearly having some kind of breakdown. These conspiracy theories are supported by documentation. Victoria pulled out another set of papers. Corporate communications between Yamamoto New York and Yamamoto Tokyo, specifically mentioning the Sterling situation and asset acquisition through personal relationships. The conference room door opened. David Morrison stepped inside, shaking rain from his coat. Sorry I'm late, traffic was murder. Marcus spun around. This is a private family meeting. Actually, David smiled pleasantly, this is a business negotiation that requires legal counsel, especially given the potential federal implications. Eleanor's eyes sharpened. Federal implications? David placed his own folder on the table. The sound echoed in the quiet room. Corporate espionage, immigration fraud, securities violations. He counted on his fingers like he was listing grocery items. Should I continue? Victoria felt a surge of satisfaction at the shocked silence. 20 years of being dismissed, overlooked, underestimated. Not anymore. So here's my counter-proposal. She pulled out a final document. The pages were crisp, official. I keep my full partnership stake in Sterling Industries. You file for divorce on standard terms, which means I get half of all marital assets accumulated during our 20-year marriage. Brooke returns to Japan immediately and resolves her visa issues through legitimate channels. Absolutely not. Marcus's face was flushed red. Victoria, you're not thinking clearly. The stress of this situation, the stress of discovering my husband has been running the 2-year con job. Yes, it's been stressful. Victoria's voice remained calm, controlled. But I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years. Eleanor leaned forward. And if we refuse your counter-proposal, then tomorrow morning David files for divorce on my behalf, requesting full discovery of all business communications between Sterling Industries and Yamamoto Industries for the past 3 years. We also request investigation into any potential immigration violations and corporate espionage. Victoria paused to let that sink in. The rain against the window seemed to emphasize her words. Oh, and we immediately notify Yamamoto Industries that their corporate partnership negotiations may have been compromised by employee misconduct. Brooke spoke for the first time since Victoria had entered the room. Victoria, please. You don't understand. It's not what you think. Explain it to me. Brooke looked at Marcus, then Eleanor, then back at Victoria. Her eyes were wide, frightened. The relationship, it started as business, but it became real. The baby is real. Marcus is real. I'm sure it feels real. Victoria's voice held no cruelty, just exhaustion. But Brooke, you're 28 years old. You've been working in corporate espionage since you graduated college. Do you really think this is your fairy tale ending? It doesn't matter what anyone thinks, Marcus interrupted. Brooke and I are getting married. You can either make this easy or difficult, but the outcome is the same. Victoria looked around the table. Marcus, defensive and angry. Eleanor, calculating damage control, like a general planning retreat. Brooke, young and scared and probably realizing she'd been played by experts. You're right, Marcus. You and Brooke probably will get married, but it won't be with my blessing, my participation, or my assets. Victoria collected her papers, and it won't be with the Yamamoto contract. She headed for the door, then turned back. The gesture was theatrical, but the words were deadly serious. Oh, and Eleanor, you might want to call your lawyer. When Yamamoto Industries finds out their corporate intelligence was compromised by personal relationships, they're going to have questions about whether Sterling Industries can be trusted with sensitive business information. Victoria walked out, leaving behind 20 years of marriage and 20 years of making herself smaller for people who'd never seen her value. Her heels clicked against the marble floor in a steady rhythm. Each step took her further from the woman she'd been and closer to the woman she was becoming. In the hallway, David caught up with her. Victoria, that was either brilliant or completely insane. Probably both. Victoria felt lighter than she had in years. The weight of pretending was finally gone. David, what happens now? Now we find out if they're as smart as they think they are. Victoria's phone was already ringing. Marcus's name flashed on the screen. She looked at David, then at the phone, then smiled. The expression felt foreign on her face, like she was learning a new language. Let's find out. I'm not the naive wife they think I am. The thought came to her with crystalline clarity. I never was. Victoria didn't answer Marcus's call, or the next 5 calls, or Eleanor's texts, or the 17 voicemails that accumulated over the next 2 hours like digital evidence of their desperation. Instead, she drove to Cary Park and sat on a bench overlooking Elliott Bay. The Seattle skyline glittered in the evening light, beautiful and distant, like looking at someone else's life through a telescope. The rain had stopped, leaving the air clean and sharp. Her phone rang again. This time it was James. Mom, Dad said you're sick. Are you okay? Victoria closed her eyes. 15 years old, her smart, sensitive son, who worried too much and loved too deeply. I'm okay, honey. Where are you? Dad picked us up from school early. We're at Grandma Eleanor's. James's voice was careful, like he was navigating a minefield. Mom, what's happening? Dad and Grandma keep having these whispered conversations, and Becca's crying. Her daughter, 12 years old and already more intuitive than the adults around her. Victoria's heart clenched like a fist. Can I talk to Becca? She's in the bathroom. Mom, are you and Dad getting divorced? The question hit like a physical blow. Victoria gripped the phone tighter. The metal was warm against her palm. We're having some problems, James. Adult problems that have nothing to do with you and Becca. That's what parents always say. But if you get divorced, what happens to us? Victoria stared out at the water. What happened to them? If she fought Marcus and Eleanor, if she exposed the Yamamoto situation, if she forced a public battle, what happened to her children? The 2 people who mattered more than corporate contracts and personal vindication. I don't know, sweetheart. I'm trying to figure that out. Mom, James's voice got smaller. There's a lady here. Dad says she's going to be around more. She's pregnant. Victoria's heart shattered. They'd brought Brooke to Eleanor's house, where her children were. The pregnant mistress was meeting her children, while Victoria sat alone on a park bench watching her life implode. Mom, are you still there? I'm here. Victoria's voice was steadier than she felt. James, I need you to take care of Becca tonight, okay? And I need you to remember that whatever happens between your dad and me, it's not your fault. None of this is your fault. When are you coming home? Home, the word felt foreign. The house that had been her sanctuary now felt like enemy territory, a place where other people made decisions about her life. I don't know, honey. Soon. After she hung up, Victoria sat in the darkening evening and finally let herself fall apart. The tears came in waves. 20 years of marriage. 20 years of building a life, a family, a business. 20 years of loving someone who'd been planning to replace her for the last 2. The sobs tore from her throat like they were being ripped out by force. Her phone buzzed with a text from Grace. Staying at my place tonight. Don't argue. Victoria almost smiled through her tears. Grace, who'd seen this disaster coming years before Victoria had been willing to admit it. Grace, who'd been quietly documenting Marcus's behavior patterns and Eleanor's increasing hostility. Another text, this one from David. Yamamoto Industries requesting emergency meeting tomorrow. They know. Victoria stared at the message. The careful house of cards Marcus and Eleanor had built was starting to collapse. But as it fell, it would crush everything in its path, including her children, including the innocent employees at Sterling Industries, including the future she'd spent 20 years building. Her phone rang. Marcus again. This time she answered. Victoria, we need to talk. We needed to talk 2 years ago, Marcus, before you started sleeping with a corporate spy. We needed to talk before you decided to humiliate me publicly. We needed to talk before you brought your pregnant mistress to meet our children. Victoria's voice was ice over molten fury. Now we have lawyers. Don't do this, Victoria. Don't destroy our family because you're hurt. I'm not destroying our family. You already did that. Victoria stood up from the bench. I'm just refusing to smile and help you with the cleanup. The kids are asking questions. Then answer them honestly. Tell them their father fell in love with someone else. Tell them about the baby. Tell them mommy and daddy are getting divorced. Victoria's voice cracked despite her efforts to control it. Just don't tell them it's my fault for not being understanding enough to marry your mistress. Silence on the other end of the line. The kind of silence that spoke louder than words. Victoria, if you push this Yamamoto thing, if you make it public, it doesn't just hurt me, it hurts the company, it hurts our employees, it hurts our children's future. Our children's future? Victoria laughed, but there was no humor in it. Marcus, you spent 2 years planning to erase me from their lives. You brought your pregnant girlfriend to Eleanor's house where they're staying. You asked me to participate in covering up corporate espionage. And now you're worried about their future? I'm trying to protect them from a messy public divorce. No, you're trying to protect yourself from the consequences of your choices. Victoria was walking back to her car now, anger giving her energy. But here's what you don't understand, Marcus. I spent 20 years protecting you, protecting us, protecting the family image. I'm done, Victoria, listen to me. We can work this out. We can find a solution that works for everyone. We had a solution that worked for everyone. It was called a marriage. You decided you preferred corporate espionage and a pregnant mistress. Victoria reached her car. I'll see you in court. She hung up and immediately called Grace. Vic, how are you holding up? I'm falling apart. But I'm doing it strategically. Victoria leaned against her car. The metal was cold against her back. Grace, I need you to tell me honestly. Am I being vindictive? Am I hurting my kids by fighting this? Silence for a moment. Then Grace's voice, gentle but firm. Vic, what would you tell Becca to do if she were in this situation? What would you want James to do if someone treated him this way? Victoria closed her eyes. I'd tell them to fight. I'd tell them they deserve better. Then that's your answer. As Victoria drove toward Grace's apartment, her phone lit up with texts. Marcus, Eleanor, even Brooke. All variations of the same theme. Let's be reasonable. Let's find a compromise. Let's think about the children. But Victoria was done being reasonable, done compromising, done thinking about everyone except herself. Tomorrow she would face the consequences of her choice. Tonight she would grieve the end of her marriage and the beginning of whatever came next. She sat in her parked car outside Grace's apartment for 10 minutes, unable to make herself go inside and admit her marriage was really over. The engine ticked as it cooled. The radio played soft jazz that seemed to come from another world, a world where wives didn't have to choose between dignity and financial security. Finally, Victoria turned off the engine and walked toward the light streaming from Grace's windows, toward friendship and wine and the beginning of a new life. Grace's apartment smelled like vanilla candles and wine. Real wine, not the expensive bottles Marcus chose to impress clients. Victoria curled up on the familiar couch with a glass of cheap Pinot Grigio and felt more at home than she had in months. The apartment was small, cozy, books everywhere, photos of Grace's travels covering the walls. It felt lived in, authentic, nothing like the sterile perfection of the Sterling house. David called. Grace settled beside her with her own glass. Yamamoto Industries is flying their executive team to Seattle tomorrow morning. Emergency meetings all day. Victoria stared into her wine. The liquid swirled like a small tornado. It's really happening, isn't it? The question is, are you ready for what happens next? Before Victoria could answer, Grace's doorbell rang. They looked at each other, confused. It was nearly 10 p.m. Grace's building had a security system. No one could get up without being buzzed in. Grace checked the security camera on her phone. Her expression shifted from confusion to shock. Oh my God, Vic, it's Brooke. What? Brooke Hamilton. She's at my door. She looks terrible. Victoria set down her wine. Don't answer it. The doorbell rang again, then again, insistent, desperate. Grace's phone buzzed with a text. She showed Victoria the screen. Please, I need to talk to Victoria. I know you're both there. Please. Vic, she's crying. Victoria looked at the door, then at Grace, then back at her wine. 2 years of manipulation, 2 years of lies, 2 years of this woman sleeping with her husband while pretending to be a family friend. But something in Brooke's message felt different, desperate, real. Let her in. Grace stared at her. Are you sure? I want to hear what she has to say. Grace opened the door. Brooke Hamilton stood in the hallway looking nothing like the composed corporate spy from this afternoon. Her makeup was smeared, creating dark trails down her cheeks. Her designer dress was wrinkled. Her hands shook like autumn leaves. Thank you. Brooke's voice was barely a whisper. I wasn't sure you'd... Sit down. Victoria's tone was neutral. Talk. Brooke perched on the edge of Grace's armchair like she might need to run. I know you hate me. I know you have every right to hate me, but I need you to understand something. I'm listening. Marcus lied to you, but he lied to me too. Brooke's hands twisted in her lap. When I met him, I thought you were separated. He said the marriage had been over for years. He said you were staying together for business reasons. Victoria felt Grace tense beside her. And you believed him? I wanted to believe him. Brooke's voice cracked. I was 26, working a job I hated, trying to stay in a country that didn't want me. And here was this successful, charming man telling me I was special. Victoria studied Brooke's face. The tears looked real. The exhaustion looked real. But Victoria had been fooled before. So you didn't know about the Yamamoto connection? Victoria's voice was carefully controlled. Brooke looked up sharply. How do you... Yes, I knew. That's how we met. Marcus reached out to Yamamoto about me specifically, said he needed someone who understood Japanese business culture. For legitimate consulting work? At first, yes, I was helping with cultural communication, business etiquette, that kind of thing. Brooke wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. But then Marcus started asking questions about Yamamoto's internal processes, their decision-making criteria, their concerns about American business partnerships. Victoria exchanged a look with Grace. And you told him? I told him what anyone could find in public filings or business journals. I thought I was helping Sterling Industries present themselves better. Brooke's voice was getting stronger, more desperate. I didn't know I was giving him intelligence to manipulate the partnership negotiations. When did you figure it out? 3 months ago, when Yamamoto started asking me questions about Sterling Industries that I hadn't told them. When I realized information was flowing both ways. Brooke stood up, pacing to the window. That's when I tried to end it with Marcus. Victoria felt something shift in her chest. Tried to end it. He said it was too late. Said I was already in too deep. Said if I tried to leave, he'd make sure Yamamoto knew I'd been passing information to Sterling Industries. Brooke turned back to face them. He said they'd have me deported for corporate espionage. Grace leaned forward. So you stayed because he was blackmailing you? I stayed because I was scared. And because... Brooke's hand moved to her stomach. Because by then I was pregnant. Victoria studied the younger woman's face. The fear looked real. The exhaustion looked real. But Victoria had been manipulated by experts for 2 years. If Marcus was blackmailing you, why didn't you go to Yamamoto yourself? Tell them what was happening. Because I'd already passed information to him. Even if I didn't know what he was doing with it, I'd still violated my employment contract. I'd still lose my show and my visa. Brooke sank back into the chair. And because Marcus said you knew, he said you were part of the plan. Victoria's wine glass slipped from her hand, shattering on Grace's hardwood floor. The sound was sharp, final. He said what? He said you'd been pushing him to find a way to get closer to Yamamoto Industries. He said the marriage arrangement was your idea, a way to bring me into the family officially so we could access better intelligence. Brooke was crying again. He said you were tired of being married to him anyway, and this solved everyone's problems. Grace was already cleaning up the broken glass, but Victoria couldn't move. The scope of Marcus's manipulation was staggering. He'd convinced Brooke that Victoria was the mastermind, convinced Victoria that Brooke was the seductress, convinced Eleanor that it was all a reasonable business arrangement. Brooke, Victoria's voice was very quiet. This afternoon, when I accused you of being a Yamamoto spy, why didn't you tell me this? Because Eleanor said if I ever told anyone the truth about how the relationship started, she'd make sure both you and I were charged as accessories to corporate espionage. Brooke wiped her nose with a tissue Grace handed her. She said you'd both go to prison, and my baby would be born while I was being deported. Victoria stood up slowly. Eleanor knew. From the beginning, Eleanor knew Marcus was blackmailing you. Eleanor orchestrated it. Brooke's voice was barely audible. Marcus isn't smart enough to run a 2-year corporate espionage operation, but his mother is. The room fell silent except for the sound of gray sweeping glass and the distant hum of Seattle traffic. Brooke! Victoria's voice was steady now, purposeful. Tomorrow morning, Yamamoto Industries is coming to Seattle for emergency meetings. What do you think they're going to ask you? Everything. They're going to want to know every conversation I had with Marcus, every piece of information I shared, every detail about the relationship. Brooke looked terrified. And when they find out about the pregnancy, about the marriage arrangement, they're going to assume you're a double agent. Grace finished the thought. They're going to assume you've been playing all sides. Victoria walked to the window, looking out at the Seattle skyline. Somewhere out there, Marcus and Eleanor were probably planning damage control, probably assuming that Victoria would fall in line to protect her children, that Brooke would stay quiet to protect herself. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Brooke, do you want out of this? What do you mean? Victoria turned back to face her. I mean, do you want to stop being a victim and start being a solution? I don't understand. Tomorrow morning, you're going to tell Yamamoto Industries everything. Every conversation with Marcus, every piece of information you shared, every threat Eleanor made. Victoria's voice was gaining strength with each word. And you're going to do it with immunity. Immunity? Grace caught on first. Whistleblower protection. If Brooke comes forward voluntarily with information about corporate espionage, she becomes a witness, not a perpetrator. Victoria smiled for the first time all day. Brooke, how would you like to help me destroy the people who've been manipulating both of us? All three women sat there checking their phones obsessively. They knew Marcus and Eleanor were probably trying to reach them, but none of them was ready to face those calls. Not yet. Tomorrow would change everything. Tonight they planned. The Yamamoto Industries emergency meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. at the Fairmont Olympic Hotel. At 9:45, Victoria Sterling walked into the marble lobby wearing her best power suit and carrying a briefcase full of evidence. The lobby smelled like fresh flowers and expensive coffee. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow patterns on the walls. It felt like walking into a cathedral of commerce. David Morrison was already waiting, along with a woman Victoria didn't recognize. Victoria, this is Sarah Thompson, federal prosecutor, specializing in corporate crimes. David's introduction was crisp, professional. Sarah, Victoria Sterling. Victoria shook the prosecutor's hand. Sarah's grip was firm, confident. I wasn't expecting federal involvement quite this soon. Sarah smiled grimly. When potential corporate espionage involves international companies and immigration violations, we move quickly, especially when we have a cooperative witness. They looked toward the elevator bank where Brooke Hamilton emerged, flanked by her own attorney. She looked terrified but determined, like someone walking toward her own execution but choosing to do it with dignity. Ready? David asked. Victoria took a deep breath. Ready. The Yamamoto Industries team had taken over the hotel's largest conference room. 6 executives, including 2 who'd flown in from Tokyo overnight. Victoria recognized Kenji Yamamoto from their previous meetings. He looked tired and very, very angry. Marcus and Eleanor were already seated at the far end of the table with their legal team. Marcus looked confident, like he was attending a routine board meeting. Eleanor looked predatory, like a chess master about to claim victory. Neither looked like they expected what was about to happen. Yamamoto-san spoke first. His English was careful, precise. This is highly irregular situation. We understand there may be complications with our partnership negotiations. Victoria glanced at Sarah Thompson, who nodded slightly. Mr. Yamamoto, Victoria began, I believe you'll find the complications are more extensive than you've been told. She opened her briefcase and pulled out the first document, The papers rustled in the quiet room. 3 years ago, Sterling Industries began pursuing a partnership with your company. 2 months later, my husband Marcus Sterling initiated a personal relationship with one of your employees, Brooke Hamilton. Yamamoto-san's expression didn't change, but Victoria saw the slight tension around his eyes. What my husband didn't tell me, and what I believe he didn't tell you, is that this relationship was specifically designed to access internal Yamamoto Industries information to give Sterling Industries an advantage in partnership negotiations. That's ridiculous, Marcus interrupted. Victoria, you're having some kind of breakdown. These accusations are supported by documentation. Victoria nodded to David, who distributed copies of the evidence they'd compiled. Phone records showing coordination between Marcus Sterling and Eleanor Sterling regarding the Yamamoto situation. Email fragments recovered from Sterling Industries servers. Financial records showing payments to private investigators researching Yamamoto Industries' business practices. Eleanor finally spoke. Her voice was cold, controlled. Victoria, dear, you're misunderstanding routine business intelligence gathering. No, Eleanor, I'm understanding it perfectly. Victoria turned to Brooke. Miss Hamilton, would you please tell Mr. Yamamoto about your employment termination? Brooke's voice was shaky but clear. I was terminated from Yamamoto Industries last month when my supervisors discovered I had been passing internal company information to Marcus Sterling, information that was then used to manipulate Sterling Industries' partnership proposal. The room erupted. Yamamoto-san spoke rapidly in Japanese to his colleagues. Marcus shot to his feet, his chair rolling backward. Eleanor's lawyer started taking frantic notes. Furthermore, Brooke continued, when I attempted to end my relationship with Mr. Sterling and cease providing information, I was threatened with deportation and criminal charges if I disclosed the true nature of our arrangement. Sarah Thompson leaned forward. Ms. Hamilton has been granted whistleblower protection by the federal government in exchange for her cooperation in this investigation. Victoria watched Eleanor's face go pale. This wasn't part of their plan. They'd been playing chess while Victoria assembled a federal case. Yamamoto-san's voice cut through the chaos. Mrs. Sterling, what exactly are you proposing? I'm proposing that my husband and his mother have been running a corporate espionage operation designed to defraud your company. I'm proposing that the marriage dissolution they're demanding is actually an attempt to hide evidence of this operation. Victoria's voice grew stronger with each word. And I'm proposing that Sterling Industries' partnership proposal should be withdrawn immediately. Victoria, Marcus's voice was desperate now. You're destroying everything we built. You're destroying our children's future. No, Marcus, you did that when you decided corporate espionage was preferable to honest business practices. Victoria turned back to Yamamoto-san. Sir, I'm formally withdrawing Sterling Industries from partnership consideration and recommending that you pursue criminal charges against my husband and his mother. Eleanor finally exploded. 20 years of careful composure shattered like expensive china. You ungrateful little bitch. After everything this family has done for you, after 20 years of supporting your pathetic career fantasies, the mask was off. 20 years of passive-aggressive criticism, 20 years of subtle undermining, 20 years of making Victoria feel like she was never quite good enough for the Sterling family name. After everything this family has done for me, Victoria's voice was ice. Eleanor, I built half this company. I wrote the contracts that generated 60% of our revenue. I handled the crisis management that saved us from bankruptcy twice. What exactly has this family done for me besides try to erase me from the business I helped create? Sarah Thompson was taking notes rapidly. The Yamamoto team was conferring in urgent whispers. David Morrison looked like Christmas morning. Yamamoto-san stood up. This meeting is concluded. Yamamoto Industries will be pursuing all legal remedies against Sterling Industries and its principals. Our partnership negotiations are permanently terminated. He bowed slightly to Victoria. Mrs. Sterling, we appreciate your honesty in this matter. We will ensure our legal team coordinates with federal prosecutors as needed. As the Yamamoto team filed out, Victoria felt a strange mix of triumph and devastation. She'd just destroyed the biggest business deal in Sterling Industries' history. She'd probably destroyed the company entirely. She'd also finally told the truth. Marcus grabbed her arm as she gathered her papers. Victoria, wait. We can fix this. We can find another way. Victoria looked down at his hand on her arm, then up at his face. The desperation there was almost pitiable. Marcus, there is no we anymore. There hasn't been for 2 years. I just finally stopped pretending otherwise. She pulled her arm free and walked toward the door. Behind her, she could hear Eleanor screaming at her lawyers, Marcus pleading with empty air, and the sound of 20 years of lies finally collapsing. In the hallway, Brooke caught up with her. Victoria, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for all of this. Victoria stopped walking. Brooke, you were 26 years old being manipulated by experts. I was 40 years old and I let them do it too. We both have to live with our choices. What happens now? To the baby? To my visa status? Victoria looked at the young woman who'd been as much a victim as a perpetrator. Now you tell the truth to federal prosecutors, you get your life back, and you raise your child away from people who think love is a business transaction. And you? Victoria smiled, and for the first time in months, it reached her eyes. Now I remember who I was before I became Mrs. Sterling. In that moment, sitting in the hotel bathroom 5 minutes later, looking at herself in the mirror, Victoria finally saw clearly. Not the reflection of a failed wife or a destroyed businesswoman, but a woman who'd chosen truth over comfort, a woman who'd chosen integrity over security, a woman who was finally free. I was never the problem. I was the solution they were trying to hide. 2 weeks later, Victoria sat in her new temporary office, a converted bedroom in Grace's apartment, reviewing the final documents for Sterling Industries' bankruptcy filing. The company she'd helped build for 20 years was dissolving, its assets seized by federal investigators, its reputation destroyed by corporate espionage charges. She should have felt devastated. Instead, she felt free. The morning light streamed through Grace's windows, illuminating dust motes that danced like tiny celebrations. Outside, Seattle was waking up. Coffee shops opening. People heading to jobs that didn't involve corporate espionage or marriage fraud. Her phone rang. James. Mom, can you come pick us up? Dad's not doing well. Victoria's heart clenched. What do you mean, honey? Where are you? We're at Grandma Eleanor's, but she's been arrested and Dad's been drinking, and Becca's scared. James's voice was trying to stay steady, but she could hear the cracks. Can you come get us? I'm on my way. Victoria grabbed her keys and called David Morrison. Eleanor's been arrested? This morning, federal charges for corporate espionage, immigration fraud, and obstruction of justice. David's voice was grim. Marcus is next. They're building the case methodically. And my kids are in the middle of it. Victoria, you need to file for emergency custody today. Victoria was already in her car, driving toward the Sterling family mansion in Bellevue. I'll call you back. The house she'd visited for 20 years of family dinners and holiday celebrations looked different now. Smaller somehow, less imposing. Several cars were parked in the driveway. Federal agents probably, collecting evidence. Victoria found her children sitting on the front steps with their suitcases. They looked so young, so vulnerable. James trying to be the man of the family at 15. Becca clutching her stuffed elephant like a lifeline. Mom! Becca ran to her, tears streaming down her face. They took Grandma away in handcuffs, and Dad won't stop yelling. Victoria hugged her daughter tight, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. Over Becca's head, she saw James approaching more slowly, his face older than 15 should look. Where's your father now? Inside, screaming at his lawyers. James's voice was flat, emotionless. Mom, are we going to be okay? Victoria pulled her son into the hug. Yes, we're going to be okay. They loaded the suitcases into Victoria's car just as Marcus stumbled out of the house. His hair was disheveled, his shirt wrinkled, and Victoria could smell alcohol from 10 feet away. He looked nothing like the polished executive who'd built a corporate empire. Victoria, thank God you're here. This is all a misunderstanding. We can fix this. Get in the car, Victoria said quietly to her children. They obeyed immediately, recognizing the tone that meant business. Marcus approached her with the desperate energy of a drowning man. Eleanor's lawyer says this will all blow over. Corporate espionage is hard to prove. We just need to stick together, present a united front. Victoria looked at the man she'd loved for 20 years, really looked at him. The weak chin he'd hidden behind expensive suits, the small eyes that had never quite met hers when he was lying, the hands that gestured dismissively when anyone challenged his version of reality. Marcus, Eleanor confessed. What? This morning when they arrested her, she gave a full confession about the Yamamoto operation, about blackmailing Brooke, about the plan to force me out of the company. Victoria's voice was steady, matter of fact. She threw you under the bus completely. Marcus's face crumpled. That's not, she wouldn't, we had an agreement. You had an agreement with a woman who spent 40 years manipulating everyone around her. What made you think you were special? Victoria, please. I need you. The kids need stability. We can work this out. Victoria looked through her car window at James and Becca, both watching their father with expressions that broke her heart. Fear, disappointment, the painful recognition that the man they'd looked up to was falling apart in front of them. The kids need stability, Marcus. That's why they're coming home with me. This is their home. Victoria gestured at the federal agents carrying boxes out of the house. This isn't anyone's home anymore. Marcus grabbed her arm, the same desperate grip he'd used at the hotel. Victoria, I'm begging you, don't abandon me. Not now. Victoria gently removed his hand. Marcus, I'm not abandoning you. I'm finally stopping enabling you. She got in her car and drove away from 20 years of her life. In the rearview mirror, she watched Marcus standing alone in the driveway, getting smaller and smaller until he disappeared entirely. That evening in Grace's apartment, Victoria helped her children process the new reality. James sat at the kitchen table doing homework with grim determination. Becca curled up on the couch watching a Disney movie for the fourth time, seeking comfort in familiar stories. Victoria's phone buzzed constantly, reporters wanting statements, lawyers needing signatures, friends offering support or asking intrusive questions. Finally, she turned it off. Mom? Becca looked up from the TV. Is Dad going to jail? Victoria sat beside her daughter on the couch. He might, sweetheart. He made some very bad choices, and now he has to face the consequences. But we'll be okay? Victoria smoothed Becca's hair. We'll be okay. It might be different, and it might be hard sometimes, but we'll be okay. James looked up from his homework. Mom, I'm proud of you. What do you mean? For telling the truth, even when it was hard, even when it hurt us. James's voice was serious, mature beyond his years. Dad and Grandma Eleanor, they lied about everything. But you told the truth. Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. Sometimes telling the truth is the hardest thing you can do. But it's still right, Becca added solemnly. Victoria looked at her children, her brave, resilient, wise children, and realized they were going to be more than okay. They were going to be strong. Later that night, after James and Becca were asleep, Victoria and Grace sat on the balcony sharing a bottle of wine and watching the city lights. Any regrets? Grace asked. Victoria considered the question. The company was gone. The marriage was over. The financial security she'd taken for granted had evaporated. Her children were traumatized. Her ex-husband was facing federal charges, and her future was completely uncertain. No, she said finally, no regrets. Really? Victoria smiled. For the first time in 20 years, I don't have to pretend to be someone I'm not. I don't have to smile at Eleanor's passive-aggressive comments. I don't have to pretend Marcus's decisions make sense. I don't have to make myself smaller so other people can feel bigger. Grace raised her wine glass. To not making yourself smaller. To not making yourself smaller. They clinked glasses as Victoria's phone lit up with another call. This time, she looked at the caller ID, Brooke Hamilton. Victoria almost declined the call, then curiosity got the better of her. Hello, Brooke. Victoria, I hope it's okay that I'm calling. I wanted to thank you. Thank me? The federal prosecutors, they've arranged for me to testify against Marcus and Eleanor in exchange for immunity. My visa status is being resolved through the Witness Protection Program. Brooke's voice was stronger than Victoria had ever heard it. I'm going to be okay. The baby's going to be okay. And it's because you gave me the courage to tell the truth. Victoria felt something loosen in her chest. I'm glad, Brooke. You deserve better than what they put you through. So did you. After Victoria hung up, she sat in the quiet evening air and realized something had shifted. The anger was gone. The hurt was fading. What remained was something she hadn't felt in years. Possibility. Tomorrow she would start rebuilding, not the life she'd lost, but the life she chose. 3 months after the federal agents dismantled her old life, Victoria Sterling, soon to be Victoria Hayes again, stood in the empty office space she was about to lease in downtown Seattle. 1,200 square feet of possibility. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The space smelled like fresh paint and new beginnings. Below them, Elliott Bay sparkled like scattered diamonds. The lease terms are favorable, David Morrison said, reviewing the contract. Somewhere along the way, he'd stopped being just her divorce attorney and started being her friend. Maybe more than a friend, though neither of them had rushed to define it. The building management company knows your situation, and they're willing to work with you on the deposit. Victoria walked to the windows overlooking the water. 6 months ago, she'd been Mrs. Sterling, co-founder of a multi-million-dollar company, living in a house she'd never really chosen. Now she was Victoria Hayes, single mother, starting a consulting business with her savings account and her 20 years of experience. It's perfect. Grace emerged from the back office space, covered in dust, but grinning. The previous tenant left some furniture. Cheap stuff, but functional. We can make this work. Victoria turned around, looking at the empty space that would become Hayes Business Solutions. Corporate consulting, crisis management, business development, all the skills she'd developed while building Sterling Industries, now offered to companies that valued honesty over espionage. Have you heard from Marcus lately? Grace asked carefully. Victoria shook her head. It didn't. His trial starts next month. David says he's probably looking at 3 to 5 years. She paused. The kids ask about him sometimes, but they're adjusting. It had been a difficult transition. James and Becca were seeing a therapist, processing the trauma of watching their father's life implode and their grandmother's arrest. But they were resilient, stronger than Victoria had expected. Any guilt about that? David asked. Victoria considered the question honestly. About Marcus facing the consequences of his choices? No. About the kids having to witness it? Yes. But David, they needed to see that actions have consequences. That lying and cheating and manipulating people isn't acceptable just because you're successful. Her phone buzzed. Text from James. Good luck today, Mom. You've got this. Victoria smiled. 15 years old and already wiser than most adults she knew. The first client meeting is tomorrow, Grace said. Pemberton Industries. They need crisis management after their CFO was caught embezzling. Seems appropriate, Victoria laughed. I've become an expert in managing the aftermath of corporate crimes. The phone rang. Grace answered. Hayes Business Solutions? Yes, she's here. Just a moment. Grace covered the phone. It's a reporter from the Seattle Times. They want to interview you about the Sterling Industries case for a follow-up story. Victoria had been fielding media requests for months. The story of the corporate espionage conspiracy had captivated the business press, especially the angle about the wife who'd exposed her own husband's crimes. Tell them no comment, but thank you for the interest. Grace relayed the message and hung up. Vic, you know you could write a book about this, right? Your story, the corporate espionage, the choice between family loyalty and doing the right thing. Publishers would be interested. Victoria had thought about it. The story was certainly dramatic enough, but she wasn't ready to profit from the destruction of her marriage, even if that destruction had been necessary. Maybe someday. Right now, I want to focus on building something new. David's phone rang. He answered, then his expression grew serious. Yes, I'll tell her. No, that won't be necessary. Thank you. He hung up and looked at Victoria. That was the federal prosecutor's office. Eleanor Sterling's sentencing hearing is next week. She's asking to speak with you. Victoria felt her stomach drop. Why? They didn't say, but you don't have to see her, Victoria. You don't owe her anything. Victoria walked back to the windows, looking out at the city where she was rebuilding her life. Eleanor Sterling, the woman who'd spent 20 years making her feel inadequate, who'd orchestrated the destruction of her marriage, who'd tried to force her into an insane arrangement to cover up corporate crimes. I'll see her. Grace and David both started to protest, but Victoria held up her hand. I need to see her, not for her sake, but for mine. 2 days later, Victoria sat across from Eleanor Sterling in a sterile conference room at the Federal Detention Center. Eleanor looked smaller than Victoria remembered, older, diminished by the orange jumpsuit and the absence of her usual perfectly applied makeup. The room smelled like disinfectant and despair. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Through the reinforced windows, Victoria could see the Seattle skyline in the distance. Thank you for coming. Eleanor's voice was subdued. I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't sure I would either. They sat in silence for a moment. Victoria studied Eleanor's face, looking for traces of the imperious woman who'd intimidated her for decades. I suppose you're here to gloat, Eleanor said finally. No, I'm here to understand. Eleanor looked surprised. Understand what? Why you spent 20 years tearing me down? Why you convinced Marcus I wasn't good enough? Why you orchestrated this elaborate scheme instead of just asking me to step aside? Victoria's voice was calm, curious. I'm here to understand why you hated me so much. Eleanor's composure cracked slightly. I didn't hate you. Then what was it? I was protecting my family, my son, my legacy. Eleanor's voice grew stronger, more familiar. You were supposed to be temporary, a starter wife, someone Marcus could practice on before he found someone more suitable. Victoria felt no anger, just a strange sense of completion. But I wasn't temporary. No, you were competent, too competent. You started building the business, making yourself indispensable. Marcus started relying on you instead of me. Eleanor's eyes flashed with old resentment. You changed him, made him weak. I made him successful. You made him dependent on your ideas, your contacts, your business sense. He stopped being a Sterling and became half of a partnership. Eleanor leaned forward. Do you have any idea what it's like to watch your son disappear into someone else's vision? Victoria studied Eleanor's face. The pain there looked real. Misguided, destructive, but real. So you decided to replace me with someone you could control. Brooke was young, grateful, manageable. She would have been the perfect Sterling wife, beautiful, fertile, dependent. Eleanor's voice turned bitter. But Marcus fell in love with her. Actually fell in love, just like he fell in love with you. And that was a problem because love makes men weak. Love makes them compromise, negotiate, share power. Eleanor sat back in her chair. I didn't raise my son to share power with anyone. Victoria felt something like pity. Eleanor, you didn't raise a son, you raised a project. And when he started becoming his own person, you couldn't handle it. Perhaps, Eleanor's mask was slipping completely now, but I won't apologize for protecting my family's interests. Even if it destroyed your family? Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. Marcus will survive this. Prison, bankruptcy, public humiliation. Sterling men have survived worse. He'll rebuild. What about James and Becca? For the first time, Eleanor's composure completely crumbled. I never meant for them to be hurt. But they were hurt. They watched their father arrested, their grandmother led away in handcuffs, their family destroyed by lies and manipulation. Victoria's voice was gentle but implacable. They're in therapy, Eleanor. They're afraid to trust anyone because the adults they depended on turned out to be criminals. Eleanor was crying now, silent tears that made her look ancient. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Victoria felt no satisfaction in Eleanor's breakdown, just sadness for the waste of it all. Eleanor, I forgive you. Eleanor looked up, shocked. What? I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace, Victoria stood up. You spent 20 years trying to make me smaller, weaker, less significant, but you failed. I'm stronger now than I've ever been. As Victoria walked toward the door, Eleanor called after her. Victoria, will you tell James and Becca that I love them? Victoria paused without turning around. I'll tell them you said that. What they do with it is up to them. Driving back to her new office, Victoria felt the last weight lift from her shoulders. The anger was gone. The need for revenge was gone. The fear that Eleanor's opinion mattered was finally completely gone. She was free. Standing in her empty house one last time before the movers came, Victoria saw it clearly for what it had always been. Not a home, but a stage set, a place where she'd performed the role of the perfect wife for an audience that had never appreciated the performance. I was never the problem in this family. I was the solution they were too broken to accept. 1 year later, Victoria Hayes stood at the podium of the Seattle Convention Center, looking out at 300 women business leaders attending the Resilience in Leadership Conference. Her keynote speech was titled, "When Doing Right Means Losing Everything, a Case Study in Ethical Business Practices." The auditorium buzzed with energy. Women of all ages filled the seats, their faces expectant, hopeful. The same expression Victoria had worn countless times when seeking wisdom from other women who'd survived impossible situations. "A year ago," she began, "I had everything I thought I wanted. A successful marriage, a thriving business, financial security, social status. I also had something I didn't realize I had, a front row seat to corporate espionage, marriage fraud, and systematic manipulation." The audience was silent, hanging on every word. The question I faced was simple. Do I keep quiet and preserve my comfortable life? Or do I tell the truth and lose everything? Victoria paused, remembering the woman she'd been 12 months ago. Scared, confused, trapped by her own need to be accommodating. "I chose the truth, and I did lose everything. My marriage ended, my business collapsed, my financial security evaporated. My children watched their father go to prison, and their grandmother face federal charges. For months, I questioned whether I'd made the right choice." She clicked to the next slide, a photo of her current office bustling with activity. "But here's what I gained: my integrity, my children's respect, and the knowledge that I could survive anything." Hayes Business Solutions is now one of the fastest growing crisis management firms in the Pacific Northwest. We specialize in helping companies recover from ethical failures. I've turned my experience with corporate crime into expertise in corporate recovery. Applause rippled through the audience. More importantly, I learned that sometimes losing everything is the only way to discover who you really are when you're not trying to be what everyone else wants you to be. After her speech, Victoria mingled with attendees in the networking reception. The conversations were familiar now, women sharing stories of workplace harassment, financial abuse, corporate gaslighting. Each story reminded Victoria why she'd chosen this path. A young woman approached her, maybe 30, with anxious eyes and a too bright smile. "Ms. Hayes, I'm Jennifer Martinez. I work for Morrison Industries. Could I talk to you privately?" Victoria recognized the look, the same expression she'd worn for years when she suspected something was wrong, but couldn't quite name it. Of course. They found a quiet corner of the reception hall. "Mrs. Hayes, I think my boss is having an affair with a client's wife, and I think they're using information I'm giving them about our company's bids to help the client win contracts." Jennifer's words came out in a rush. "I don't know what to do. If I'm wrong, I'll lose my job. If I'm right and I don't say anything..." Victoria handed Jennifer her business card. "Call me tomorrow. We'll figure this out together." "You won't judge me for waiting so long to speak up?" Victoria smiled. "Jennifer, it took me 20 years to find my voice. You're doing fine." Later that evening, Victoria sat in her Capitol Hill townhouse, small but entirely hers, helping Becca with homework while James practiced piano in the living room. The sound filled the house with something Victoria had never had in the Sterling mansion: peace. The townhouse was nothing like the Bellevue estate. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen barely big enough for 3 people. But every inch of it was chosen by Victoria, paid for by Victoria, belonging entirely to Victoria. "Mom, did you really lose everything when you divorced Dad?" Becca asked, looking up from her math worksheet. Victoria considered the question. "I lost the life I had built with your father. But Becca, that life was built on lies. Sometimes you have to tear down something broken before you can build something real. Do you miss him?" Victoria thought about Marcus, now 6 months into a sentence at a minimum security federal prison. She missed the man she'd thought he was, but that man had never really existed. "I miss who I thought he was, but I don't miss being married to who he actually was." James stopped playing and joined them at the kitchen table. Mom, I'm proud of you. For what, sweetheart? For being brave. For showing us that doing the right thing matters more than being comfortable. James's voice was serious. All my friends' parents just compromise. They do whatever keeps their lives easy. But you chose hard instead of easy because hard was right. Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. Sometimes I worry that my choices hurt you kids, that you deserved a more stable childhood. Mom, Becca said firmly, we deserved an honest childhood, and that's what you gave us. Victoria's phone buzzed. Text from David Morrison. Dinner tomorrow. I have news about the Peterson case and I wanted to discuss other things. Victoria smiled. The other things had been developing slowly over the past year. Dinners that weren't quite dates, conversations that weren't quite professional, moments of connection that neither of them had rushed to define. She texted back, yes to dinner, yes to other things. The doorbell rang. Victoria opened it to find a delivery man holding an enormous bouquet of flowers. Victoria Hayes? That's me. Special delivery. Victoria took the flowers, confused. The card was simple. Congratulations on your keynote speech today. You inspire me every day. A grateful client who found her voice. Victoria smiled, remembering the dozens of women who'd sought her help over the past year. Each one a reminder that her choice to speak up had ripple effects she'd never imagined. Later, after the kids were in bed, Victoria sat on her back deck with a glass of wine and her laptop, working on client proposals. Hayes Business Solutions was thriving beyond her wildest expectations. Companies wanted ethical leadership consulting from someone who'd proven she would choose integrity over profit. Her phone rang. Grace, how was the speech? Good, scary, empowering. Victoria saved her work and closed the laptop. Grace, do you ever wonder what would have happened if I just signed those papers? If I'd married Brooke and kept quiet about the Yamamoto situation? Do you? Victoria considered it. Sometimes, in an alternate universe, maybe I'm still Mrs. Sterling, living in that big house, pretending everything is fine while Marcus and Eleanor run their schemes. And in that universe, are you happy? No, Victoria's answer was immediate and certain. In that universe, I'm still pretending to be someone I'm not. I'm still making myself smaller so other people can feel bigger. I'm still teaching my children that truth is optional if it's inconvenient. Any regrets about the path you chose? Victoria looked through her kitchen window at James and Becca, both reading in the living room, both strong and honest and unafraid to speak up when something was wrong. None. Her phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. Ms. Hayes, I saw your speech online. I think my husband is embezzling from his company and I don't know what to do. Can you help? Victoria smiled and typed back, yes, you're going to be okay. Because that was what she did now. She helped women find their voices, their strength, their courage to choose difficult truths over comfortable lies. As she was about to put her phone away, it rang one more time. Unknown number. Hello? Victoria? The voice was shaky, uncertain. It's Marcus. Victoria's heart stopped. Marcus, how are you calling me? Phone privilege. Good behavior. His voice was different, smaller. Victoria, I've been thinking about what you said, about the choices I made. Victoria stood up, walking to the window. What do you want, Marcus? I want to apologize. Really apologize. Not because I want something, but because I owe you the truth. Marcus's voice cracked. You were right about everything. About Eleanor, about Brooke, about me. I destroyed our family because I was too weak to stand up to my mother and too selfish to appreciate what I had. Victoria felt something she hadn't expected. Not satisfaction, not vindication, but sadness for the man he might have been, for the marriage they might have had. Marcus, I appreciate the apology, but it doesn't change anything. I know it doesn't. But Victoria, I need you to know something. Well, Marcus was crying now. When I get out, I'm going to spend the rest of my life making this right. Not for you, not for us, but for James and Becca. They deserve better than the father I was. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Marcus? Yeah, I hope that's true, for their sake. After she hung up, Victoria sat in the quiet of her small, perfect kitchen and realized something profound. She wasn't angry anymore. She wasn't hurt anymore. Marcus Sterling was a chapter in her story, not the whole book. A year ago, Victoria Sterling had been a woman who'd lost herself in 20 years of accommodation and compromise. Tonight, Victoria Hayes was a woman who knew exactly who she was and what she stood for. Her phone buzzed with another message from another woman who needed to know that choosing truth over comfort was possible, that losing everything could be the beginning of finding yourself. Victoria Hayes checked her reflection in her laptop screen before closing it, seeing a woman she finally recognized and liked. Outside, Seattle glittered in the darkness, full of possibility and new beginnings. Victoria Hayes raised her wine glass to the city lights, to her children's laughter drifting through the window, to the life she'd built from the ashes of everything she'd lost. To not making yourself smaller, she whispered, echoing the toast she'd shared with Grace a year ago. In the distance, her phone buzzed with another message from another woman who needed to know that survival was possible, that rebuilding was possible, that sometimes the best revenge was simply becoming the person you were always meant to be. Victoria Hayes, former victim turned victor, set down her wine and got back to work. I am exactly who I was meant to be. And that's how Victoria Hayes went from being a victim of manipulation to becoming the woman who brought down an entire corporate empire. But here's my question for you. What would you have done in Victoria's situation? Would you have signed those papers to protect your children? Or would you have chosen the dangerous path of truth like Victoria did? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one, and I love hearing your perspectives on these incredible stories. If this story of courage and transformation inspired you, please hit that like button. It helps more people discover these amazing tales of resilience. And don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell, because I've got more jaw-dropping stories of women who refuse to stay silent. Share this with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to find your voice and fight for your truth. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to make yourself smaller for people who don't appreciate your worth. Until next time, remember, your voice matters, your truth matters, and you are stronger than you know. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next story.